Are,
onto the clip.
are the students in?
Yeah, yep, we've got 4 of them in now.
Got it. Okay.
So welcome attendees, and there's more coming in, fantastic. Welcome all you guys. This is gonna be our wonderful webinar on the supply chain management program here at CLC. This is a webinar, so you will not be able to speak. We can't see you. You can see me and Miss Pam here though. If you do have any questions as she's going through, please either put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will address those at the end of the session. I will also answer questions separately regarding getting started in programs as we have time after Pam does her thing. So this is Pam. I'm going to let her take over from here, and welcome everybody.
So I'm glad to see you in a virtual environment. I'm happy that you joined us this evening. I am department chair of the supply chain management program at CLC. The program's been around for 4 years now. So started recognizing the high level of need for supply chain professionals in Lake County and in the surrounding area, recognizing that this is a growing field and wanting to provide credentials, training for people like you. So I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share and work through to describe the program. So Bryn, you can see the PowerPoint. I'm assuming if you can, then everybody can.
Yes, I can.
All right, good. So again, Pam Jansen, my background, I have a master's degree in industrial engineering. So that's the MSIE that you see on the slide there. CPIM is a certified production and inventory manager through ASCM, Association for Supply Chain Management. And I've got a couple quotes, some reference materials from them in the presentation. So you'll see that ASCM again. And then I'm certified as an SC Pro Level 1 through another supply chain management professional organization, the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. And I'll talk a little bit about that organization too when I talk about the capstone. My contact information is there. If you Google CLC SCM, you can go to the CLC webpage too that talks about the SCM, the Supply Chain Management Program, and my contact information is there as well. So I'm going to assume that you're somewhat familiar with supply chain because you showed up to hear more about it, but I'm also going to kind of start from the basics to describe it, just to give us a frame of reference. So the idea, the big part of supply chain is it relates to the movement of materials. So how do I get my raw materials from my vendor? How do I bring them into my facility and use them effectively and move them around efficiently? How do I get my finished goods in the hands of my customers? So moving those materials, and supply chain has encompassed then a lot of different areas of an organization. And that idea of a chain is reminding us that it's not just my company, that I have to work with my vendors, I have to work with my customers. I need to pay attention, hopefully not even to just those two, but beyond that, to create that coordination of the materials. We're also sharing information. We're also obviously in a business dealing with the financial aspects, the movement of funds to pay for those materials. You see supply chain in service as well. If you think of a hospital as more of a service provider instead of a goods producer, they still have critical materials they need to have on hand. So there's going to be supply chain within service organizations too, from a material standpoint, and then also applying the ideas of supply chain to the operations within a service organization like a hospital. So again, a service provider that provides ambulance services to your hospital, and then on the customer end, some of the additional vendors, additional services that are provided. How do I coordinate those? So it's not just goods, but we tend to talk more about production and manufacturing when we talk about supply chain. So this little bar down at the bottom just is trying to give you an idea within an organization how I'm looking at my vendors, the sourcing and procurement that has to go on, any inbound movement of materials, the actual production, the outbound storage and transportation, getting the product in the hand of the consumer, and then that follow-up. We talk about reverse logistics being a big area in supply chain today. Totally exploded during the pandemic because of so many people buying things online. So they would buy them. If they didn't work out, they would ship them back. That idea of getting returned goods and being able to quickly move them back into inventory or get them back to the vendor if there was an issue with them, that's been a growing field or a growing area of interest in supply chain. So supply chain is changing and expanding as the market, the business environment shifts. So these are different components in the supply chain management process. Supply chain is big and it's broad. So it's hard for me to say, if you work in supply chain, you'll do this, because you may work in logistics, or you may work in quality, or you may work in warehousing. Very broad field. This does a nice job of just showing all those different functional areas that are playing in that movement of materials and information. This just gives an example, trying to show you in a business setting, what are those steps that we're seeing. So my example here, I'm working with Woodland Foods, is a company where their VP of supply chain is on my advisory committee. So in this example, kind of walking through their supply chain, they get in salt. So salt is mined, other methods to create salt, but we'll just talk about that. Morton Salt produces the salt. So then it is shipped, in my example, to Woodland Foods in 20, 50-pound bags, depending on what they order. So you're dealing with that transportation. Comes to the company, and in my example, they're using the salt to put into their fajita seasoning. So there's an operation that happens. They're boxing that product up. It goes to their customer. In this case, we'll talk about Cisco, one of the large food service providers. So Cisco gets in these boxes of fajita mix. They then redistribute it, resell it to a restaurant, and then it's in the hands of the consumer. So here you can see all those different steps. I think I've got some arrows pointing through there. I could have clicked on those while I was talking through. And then in my next slide, just to highlight, here are different roles that you could see popping up. And these aren't limited. They're much broader than this, but some examples. So you could have an operations manager, a production scheduler, materials manager, a transportation analyst, a purchasing agent or a receiving clerk, production workers, logistics manager, warehouse coordinator, shipping manager, a packaging engineer, inventory manager. Once you get down to the individual stores that are purchasing the items, a buyer, a planner. The consumer's certainly part of the supply chain too. And there's really many more roles. So again, just trying to give you a feel for the breadth of the field and the diversity in the roles. Couple different perspectives. This is fairly current information that I pulled again from that Association for Supply Chain Management, that there was a talent gap before the pandemic. And you would have to kind of have your head in the sand the last, 15 months to not see information about supply chain. We read about it, we heard about it, we experienced it ourselves when we tried to buy toilet paper. We talk about it now when we talk about semiconductors and microchips and how the auto industry has been slowed down because their suppliers of chips are over in Asia Pacific, and they either have production problems because they have workers out with COVID, or they have logistics problems shipping those items across the ocean. We've got dock backups. So we've heard a lot about supply chain in the last 15 months, more than we did before. And before that, there was still a lot of demand. So this article from Logistics Management said that even before COVID, there was one qualified candidate for every 6 supply chain job openings. There was a lot of demand for people and maybe not as many people applying for those jobs. So again, referencing that demand and also referencing how important the supply chain roles have become in organizations. So seeing the value that supply chain professionals bring to organizations and wanting people with that skill set. This is from a study by that Association of Supply Chain Management. They do an annual survey of supply chain management professionals. So the statistics here, my only caution when you look at these statistics is that it's looking at people that are early in their supply chain career, partway through, at the end. So these numbers are going to be high because you've got people with 2 years of experience and people with 25 years of experience. You could go open up this salary survey. You could just Google ASCM 2020 salary survey and read more detail. But a couple of high-level points, 88% of people that work in supply chain like what they do. Median salary by education, associate degree 67,000, bachelor degree 78, graduate degree 95. Again, some people have 2 years of experience, some people have 30 years of experience. So bear that in mind when you look at these numbers. The field is growing. Bureau of Labor Statistics says it's growing at 7% annually, the job opportunities. And then supply chain graduates average 10 to 50% higher earnings than counterparts in other industries, broad stroke looking at many other industries. A big point about Chicago, we are lucky to be here. Chicago is a transportation center. It's a distribution center, just geographically in the middle of the country, dealing with a lot of major, roadways, trucking coming through. We've got the lake. We've got some movement of goods across waterways, but it's really become a very strong market for the movement of goods, within the Chicagoland area. So that's a bonus for us for the need for supply chain professionals. Again, this is a little more wage information. This is looking at a payscale.com study, looking at a supply chain analyst, which would be kind of a entry level, maybe 2 to 5 year career point. Again, a statistic of about 60,000 as an annual survey. This is looking at a higher level across the United States, some statistics from Indeed.com. Again, we'd have to look in Lake County, understand the statistics within Lake County. These numbers are presented on a broader level. They're presented on a more range of experience level too. So, take these as a good indicator of the great opportunities in the field. This is a list that's a couple years old. So 2017, I worked with Lake County Partners, one of the kind of industry movers and shakers, encouraging businesses to move into Lake County, identifying codes, job identification codes for areas in supply chain. And there's not a code for supply chain. Like I said before, there's codes for many different types of roles. So when we put together this report a few years ago, we were looking at the number of jobs in Lake County, McHenry County, DuPage County, and Kenosha County. So multi-county area, but looking at the number of people working in these variety of roles. So you work in logistics, there's about 1,500 people in 2017 who had a role of logistics or logistician. Order clerks, about 1,600. Stock clerks and order fillers, 19,000. So again, a lot of people serving in these roles in the Chicagoland area. I went on Indeed.com earlier today and typed in Grays Lake, typed in within 25 miles of Grays Lake, and just typed in supply chain management. And this is just a sample of the different roles, different companies, different locations that I saw. There were 400 supply chain management jobs within 25 miles of Grays Lake. So a purchasing manager, a supply chain management specialist, logistics, order management, operations. Again, you can see that gamut of opportunities in the field. So I'm going to shift gears now. Hopefully I've sold you that this is a great field, if you didn't already know that. The program that we've got at the College of Lake County, it's 2 certificates and an associate degree. So the Introduction to Supply Chain Management certificate is 5 classes, and I'll show you a list of the classes on the next slide so we can talk about those specifically. The Advanced Supply Chain Management certificate, you take those 5 classes in the intro certificate, you add 5 more specific supply chain classes. And then the Associate in Supply Chain Management is roughly 10 courses additional on top of the Advanced Supply Chain Management certificate. And those are going to be classes in business, in more general studies. Again, I'll show you a list of that. We use the term stackable. These certificates in this associate degree are stackable because you earn that 5-course intro certificate, and then you stack on top of it 5 more classes to get the advanced certificate, and then you stack on top of it 10 more classes to get the associate. And you can work on the associate the whole way along, or you can work on the intro certificate first and then move your way through it. So that's kind of that stackable idea. So the Intro to Supply Chain Management certificate, you would take an Introduction to Business course, you would take a computer course, and you've got a choice here. You could take more of an Excel focused course. A lot of supply chain management professionals use spreadsheets a lot. So having a comprehensive spreadsheet course in your tool bag is a good idea. Or an Introduction to Office software, more all Microsoft Office, or Introduction to Computers. There's an Operations Management course. You can pick between a Supervision or a Principles of Management course, an Introduction to Supply Chain. So again, 3 credit hours each, 15 credit hours, and you've already got a credential you can put on your resume that I have an Introduction to Supply Chain Management certificate from CLC. I have this background that I bring to a job, either something I'm already doing or a new job that I'm looking for in the field. Here are the 5 advanced supply chain management classes. So they're more functionally oriented in sourcing and procurement and inventory management, warehousing and distribution, and logistics and transportation. So kind of moving across the responsibilities within an organization for the supply chain. At the end of these classes, plus the Intro to Supply Chain and the Operations Management, after you complete those 6, we have a capstone course. And you have choices when you do this capstone course. You could do an internship if the field of supply chain management is new to you. We'll help work with you, work with the Career and Job Placement Center at the college to identify an 8-week internship. Many of our students are already working in supply chain, so you could do a project with your existing employer, a capstone project. And then the third main option for the capstone class is you could study for that SC Pro certification exam that I had on my title slide. So Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals has this SC Pro exam for the class. You work with other students and with me to prepare, and then you take that exam. So you could complete an advanced supply chain management certificate at CLC and also earn that SC Pro designation from Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. So that's a cool opportunity to provide as you're earning this advanced certificate. And then again, the associate degree, these are the other 10 classes that you would take to earn your associate in supply chain. So there's math and speech and English, and then advanced competition, composition, not competition. There's a humanities or philosophy course, economics and accounting and business law would round out your studies. And again, all this information is on the website. If you go look at CLC's supply chain management page, all of those program details are there. I do want to mention that we do have articulation agreements. So you can take your Associate of Arts and Supply Chain, your Associate of Applied Science, your AAS in supply chain, and you could transfer to UW Parkside. We have an agreement with them where they're going to take our classes and roll them into accounting or finance or business or HR or MIS or marketing. So they'll take all of your credits from your associate degree and then apply them to one of these majors. Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, again, will take our credits from our associate degree and apply them to a BS in management. And Elmhurst University, a BS in business administration. I'll point out briefly, these are not supply chain management degrees. We don't have a lot of schools in the general geography of CLC that are currently offering a bachelor's degree in supply chain management. We'll see as those programs grow if we create additional articulation agreements. But these are great opportunities to take your associate degree, have it fully transfer into a business program. This is just a list of the supply chain management courses for this fall and spring. There's a lot of information here. Again, you could go to the CLC website and do a class search and see at least fall term. Spring term isn't visible quite yet. It'll be, I think, a little bit later, maybe early fall. So there's a little bit of leading information here. So most of our classes, the supply chain management classes, which is really what I've got listed here, are available either 100% online. So you complete them, meeting deliverables, due dates for assignments, but you're doing the work on your own. We also offer hybrid classes, and we've created a structure where those hybrid classes are usually taught on Tuesday evenings. And most of our supply chain management program is set up in 8-week increments. So like you would take an introduction to business course in an 8-week structure, you could take that online, you could take it hybrid, you could take it in person. Introduction to supply chain management. In the fall, the first 8 weeks, there's a 100% online course. In the second 8 weeks, there's a hybrid class that meets 8 Tuesday evenings. You still do some work online, but you're having that class time as well. Sourcing and procurement in the fall, it's available online. In the spring, it's available in that hybrid class. And you'll see for the other advanced classes, kind of that same idea. One term it's available online, the other term it's available as a hybrid. And again, keeping generally to that 8-week model. I did have students that preferred 16 weeks. So in the spring, I'm going to offer for the first time a 16-week online introduction to supply chain management course, just to provide a different opportunity, different type of structure for the class to see if that appeals to people. So we're going to give that a try. Operations management, I do run as a 16-week class. It meets on Wednesday evenings. So in the fall, it's online. In the spring, it is face-to-face. So the goal in this past year and going forward is to make sure that the supply chain courses and all the other courses in the associate degree for supply chain are available online. So for people that are working, hard for them to get to campus, they can go through this curriculum 100% online. If you prefer to be more face-to-face in your classes, then the hybrid classes are available. So we've provided 2 different modalities to allow options. And certainly you can go back and forth and take sometimes online, sometimes hybrid. So that should provide, hopefully, trying to meet most people's needs. that's my spiel, my conversation. Again, this is the page that you can go to get information on supply chain management. Here's my contact information again, Bryn's contact information as well. I will open it up for questions. Before I do, I'll let you know that I have another appointment. So I'm going to be here to answer questions. Then I'm going to excuse myself and Bryn's going to take over. She can talk much better than me about how to enroll at CLC, how to get started as a student. So that'll be good. So I'm going to stop the share now. And if you have questions, you can type them into the chat or the question and answer, and both of us will be happy to answer those.
Yep, if they are program specific, yes, definitely. Let's use Pam's expertise while she's here. If they're more about getting started and placement testing or anything like that, you guys can save those for me either after she's done or we can have a one-on-one if you need to at a later point. I did put in the chat there if everybody can see the link directly to the website for you that gives a lot of the wonderful information that Pam shared with us on supply chain management. I'm also going to put in the chat a link to our adult learner Google site. So a lot of you may already be familiar with this, but this will give you contact information for not just me, but the other 3 adult learner College and Career Navigators if you came through another one of them, so that you can get a hold of any of us at any time. So does anybody have any questions? Put them in the Q&A, put them in the chat, anything at all? We got one in the chat there for you, Pam.
Oh, that's a good question. So if you were enrolled in the program and took the courses sequentially, how long would it take to complete the associates? So let's assume that you can take roughly 15 credits a term. If you're going full-time, 15 credits a term. And probably the longest chain of classes that you have to contend with, Introduction to Business is a co-requisite for Introduction to Supply Chain Management. So you could take it before Supply Chain Management or at the same time. So let's say, for the purposes of our conversation, you take it before. So you start out in fall of 2021, you take Intro to Business, then you take Intro to Supply Chain Management, and you take a couple other classes, maybe the computer class, maybe the math class to round out 15 credits. So we would put together that plan. Then in the spring, let's say you take sourcing and procurement and inventory management. And you could just do those 2 and again, round out your schedule with maybe an accounting class. Trying to think what else is on that list. The humanities class. Again, we could build that overall schedule. Then you could take classes in the summer. You could skip the summer. The next fall, you could take warehousing and logistics. So that would be fall of 2022. And then spring of 2023, you would be taking the capstone to supply chain management. You could double up on the advanced supply chain management classes. So in that scenario, I took you through 1, 2, 3, basically 3.5 semesters to get to those 60 credits. It would work out to be about 4 semesters, 15 credits at a time for a 60 credit program. If you are trying to move more quickly, maybe trying to earn that advanced supply chain management certificate and get that credential, in spring, you could take sourcing and procurement, inventory management, warehousing and distribution, and logistics and transportation, and operations management, which would be a super heavy supply chain term, but that would allow you to do the capstone course maybe next summer even. So with a program like that, you could potentially do fall, spring, summer, fall. I mean, you could get through it fairly quickly. So I think it's something that we would work on an individualized plan, but we're looking at about 4 terms, 4 semesters, if you're working at a full-time student status. If you go part-time, obviously it's going to stretch out a little bit longer. So hopefully, Michelle, that answered your question. Let me know in the chat if you have a follow-up question on that. Or contact one of us and we'll help with more details.
Yep. And anybody else who has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Nothing, you guys got all of that? Wow, we have some good listeners. I was enthralled personally. It gave me a lot of good background on supply chain management that I didn't already know. So I thank you very much for that, Pam. So if nobody has any other questions specifically about the program for Ms. Pam, I'm gonna let her go to get to her other obligations. I'm gonna stick around and see if anybody has any other questions about anything else, but let's all, you can't see, but I'm gonna give a round of applause to Ms. Pam, say thank you so much for your time today. Oh, there we go, we've got another question.
And that's another great question. So I have not yet incorporated SAP into the curriculum. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, SAP is a huge enterprise resource planning system, ERP system, and there are certification programs that help you learn how to use SAP. I am a part of the SAP learning community that colleges and universities can join. I just haven't incorporated it yet. So it's something that is coming into our curriculum. If you've got a high interest in that specifically, I would help you find a program that would work, especially on that training and that background. We do talk about ERP systems in several of our classes more broadly, not that specific training though.
All right, looks like we have somebody who raised their hand. For the person, oh, maybe they didn't mean to. If you raised your hand there, you can go ahead and type in your question into the chat or in the Q&A. That would be great.
Total cost, again, a really good question. I would say what you want to do is go look at the CLC tuition page, and Bryn may be able to help with this more specifically. It's a straight tuition program. Each class is 3 credit hours, so you would be able to calculate that per credit hour cost. We do have textbooks for just about every class, and unfortunately, supply chain management, there's not a lot of open resources, free resources. So I would say you would want to plan, maybe budget for about $125 for the supply chain management courses. The other courses across the college are going to vary a little bit more. There might be some lower cost textbooks and learning tools, but that would certainly be part of your budgeting process too. And again, I can give you some more details, or maybe Bryn can help with that budgeting and planning. So
yeah, definitely.
Kind of vague, but do you know off the top of your head, Bryn, what our per credit cost is right now?
Yes, so for an in-district student, if you took all in-person classes, it would be $147 per credit hour. So if each class is 3 credit hours, you're looking at about $447 per course. So it'll depend on how many courses the program is that you end up taking. And then, like she said, books would be extra on top of that. If you are utilizing, or if you're eligible for financial aid and utilizing that may cover some or all of your costs. There's also, scholarships, things like that can do that. So those are things that you can definitely have a conversation with either me, if I'm your College and Career Navigator, or your College and Career Navigator about options for payment. I did put the link in the chat there for the breakdown of tuition and fees for this College of Lake County, in case you're out of district or have questions about how that breaks down. Anyone else have anything else for our lovely Pam here?
Again, if you think of a question and you want to reach out to me at a point in the future, if you go to that CLC supply chain management page, my contact information is there. But I'm gonna scoot and head off to my next engagement. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate your vision and your interest in planning for your future.
Thank you very much, Pam. And I'm going to stick around for everybody else to answer any questions you may have about getting started here at CLC. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for this session because we don't